Serving in the U.S. Armed Forces requires a special and specific discipline. And after a certain amount of time in the U.S. Armed Forces, you become changed. You become a veteran when you exit, but your life is very, very different than that of a civilian. Your mentality is different than that of a civilian. And so living life in casual day-to-day circumstances sometimes is a challenge. There's a missing community, there's a desire for community, there's a desire for order, there's a desire for structure. So when soldiers become veterans and they get the opportunity to go somewhere different, many of them become expatriates. And so today's discussion, we're going to talk about expatriates who have come to Colombia in South America and decided to try and start their lives over in a new way, extending their love to the red, white, and blue while they learn more about the gold, blue, and the red. So enjoy the conversation today. Today's Fresh Perspectives are brought to you today by U.S. Army veteran Conrad Goetsch and U.S. Navy veteran Roy Anthony Cooper. Living an expat life is really, really a great life, in my opinion, but especially living an expat life as a veteran of the U.S. Armed Services. So I live that life, but I have the opportunity to meet so many other people who do the same thing I'm doing on a way more advanced level than me. And so today, the conversation will be with Anthony and Conrad. I am very appreciative of knowing these guys. We're in a chat group together where we just share ideas and social aspects about living life in Colombia. So Anthony, Conrad, thank you for being here. And I don't think anyone can do a better introduction for themselves than themselves. So Conrad, if you would introduce yourself first and then followed by Anthony, and we'll go forward from there.
Thanks, Louis. My name is Conrad, from the U.S., of course, from the Army. Been living abroad now for about 6 years, and the last 4 of them have been in Medellin, Colombia, and living the life down here, just enjoying it.
Well, my name is Roy Cooper. I prefer being called by my middle name, Anthony. Former Navy veteran. I've been living abroad for the past 6 months. The past 3 were in Cali, Colombia, and currently right now I'm living in Medellin.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. Anthony, it looks like you're fairly new to it, and you have sort of a diversity of locations. So I'm looking forward to some questions with you. So with that, my first question obviously is, what was your experience like in the military as opposed to civilian life now and being abroad? Like, is there a stark difference? So, Anthony, I have you start, and then Conrad, you could follow up with him. So again, like, what was your experience like being in the military, living sort of on a base or on local community for the military, and then coming abroad and kind of living sort of a similar lifestyle in the sense where the community you have is similar for you?
For myself, I come from a military family. I was born into the Navy lifestyle. So it really wasn't too much of a difference for me from growing up. Just the only difference was now, instead of me living off my father's benefits, I ended up having to work for the benefits for myself. The difference for me basically has been the military. It's kind of a wake up and you know what you're supposed to do. You kind of have everything already pre-planned, preordained for you, and you have your own things you have to deal with. Whereas in civilian life, you don't. There's nothing's pre-planned for you. Nobody's expecting you to be anywhere or do anything for anybody else. You have to get up and do it yourself. If you don't do it, nobody's going to sit down and yell at you or get in trouble, or you're going to get in trouble for actually not doing it. I don't know if anyone else can speak on that one, but that was what it was like for me in the military, for me in the Navy itself. Conrad?
Yeah, so I agree, Anthony, on that part. I'm also a military brat. My parents were both military as I grew up. And for me, I think the military is very structured. There's a lot of SOPs, standard operating procedures that you have going through, and sort of where you can read a book, or understand this is kind of what you need to do. But living abroad as a civilian, there may be a community that you can join and be a part of and understand, but you're not going to find that in a book somewhere. You have to go online to a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group, or asking the community around you to see who you can connect with. And then from there, you can sort of create your own niche or lifestyle that you can join, as we're in the military is more structured and organized. If that makes understandable.
I mean, I completely have to agree with that one, because my first couple months in Cali, basically, I was the only American out there. So life was completely different. I had to actually have most of my friends help me out to deal with things, because it's a culture difference from America to Colombia. No, that is just point blank obvious. So it took me a while to understand things, and I had to have them help me and explain things. The only reason why I didn't go back to Cali was because I needed help in basically being the only American out there, and not being able to find others within the same community made things difficult. So I ended up coming to Medellin, because I figured it's a much more bigger city. There's a lot of people much more foreigners go to Medellin. I'm pretty sure I can find a group to help me out with everything I need. And lo and behold, when I moved here, I started getting all the questions I needed answered and everything else like that.
And that it actually leads me to a thought about going back to military life. I had the opportunity to serve overseas, where I was in England for 2 years, and it was really, really an interesting thing, because I had a chance to do it myself. As I was a sponsor, I had a sponsor, and I also sponsored people when I was active duty. What was your experience like if you did serve abroad, or OCONUS as we would call it, in the military? So what was where did you go, and what was your experience like abroad as a military, active duty military? And Conrad, you first.
Yeah, for me, I mean, primarily my overseas assignments were in the sandbox. I was overseas for a little less than 2 years in Iraq, and a little over a year in Afghanistan. I'd say like the best part of that was, in some places you were able to have better meals and exercise conditions. In some places out there, they were in the middle of nowhere, which allowed you to focus on the work and get the mission done. But for me, my OCONUS stuff was really in the sandbox, and not really at a station in Europe or Asia, if that makes yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Anthony?
For me, I'm a bit more of a special case, because I never officially left America, but my duty station was in Hawaii, which the military calls OCONUS, unfortunately. So that was basically my only overseas duty, where I was stationed basically doing military intelligence over in Hawaii, still in American soil. So I really can't speak too much on it, because I never technically left America. In the military standard I did, but I never really did.
No, I understand that, and it's interesting. I've been again, I was in the Air Force, so I had some friends who went over to Hickam, and they said it really wasn't that terribly different. I mean, outside of sort of an influx of people from Asia, specifically the Oriental side of Asia that were there. And
you'll find a lot of didn't mean to interrupt you, but you'll find a lot of, basically out in Hawaii, it's Koreans and Japanese, in all honesty, Filipinos, more or less just a huge influx of them. The locals, which basically are the native Hawaiians, is very few and in between. They're almost, in the way of putting it, like gone extinct. So Hawaii is trying to keep its own natural culture alive within Hawaii itself.
Oh, I totally understand because my experience was that that's really what it was. You didn't really see a ton of, I guess, what you would call the Polynesian people or the Hawaiian people that were out there. I saw a lot of primarily saw a lot of Japanese people, and so it just sort of leading into my next question is because with that being overseas, so what made you want to come to Colombia? Because like for me, I came to learn Spanish, and I'm just being honest about that. I had been out of the military, and I was like, well, I want to learn Spanish. So Anthony, I'll let you start, and then Conrad, you can follow. But what was the reason for coming into Colombia?
Um, for me, when I got out of the military in November 2015, I immediately just started school the following January. And while I was in the military, I wanted to travel and see the world, but I never did that because I was only stationed out in Hawaii, and I left due to various reasons, which I don't want to go into. But while I was going to college, I went ahead and looked online, like the 10 cheapest places in the world to go visit that were basically on the list. And Colombia and Thailand were basically both held like the number 5 spot at the time. And it was because of how much they cost. Now, being in Hawaii, it's easier to go to Thailand, and basically that's what a lot of people do. And being that one of my hobbies is I practice martial arts and such, everyone was like, you should go to Thailand. The reason why I didn't go to Thailand is because while Thailand is the capital of Muay Thai and such like that, the issue is they have a lot of commercial gyms. And I myself, I don't like commercial gyms. I despise them with everything within my being. And in order to get to an actual real Muay Thai gym, you need to actually be invited from the camp. And unless you have those connections, it's next to impossible. So being the person I am, I was like, you know what? My Spanish is very poor, but I'm going to go ahead and go to Colombia because that's not something that you hear people say or do. And so I came out here a year ago, and basically within basically that a year since I came out here till now, I've made a total of 6 different trips down to Colombia just within that time frame.
Oh, that's cool. Conrad, what about you?
To piggyback on Anthony's side about education, my story comes from the education work side as well. So I went to school right out of the military to finish up my undergrad in the U.S. and then went to Barcelona and Spain to do a duals master program. And while I was there, I met a couple of guys who ran a company helping out expats with doing their taxes abroad. So while I met them, they rotated through South America. So I joined them. We went to Brazil for a couple of months, Argentina for a few months, and then ultimately Medellin, Colombia. And we really liked the weather here. The people are friendly, the same time zone as the U.S., which is awesome, especially when trying to help U.S. clients. And then I ended up meeting an amazing woman about 5 months later. We started dating, and then 2 years later got married, and been now together for about 2 years being married.
That's awesome. I'm gonna ask about dating life in a minute, but I want to ask you. No, well, it's important, right? So
no, it is.
So the next question and the follow up is, okay, you have the country, and Conrad, you kind of alluded to it on why Medellin was for you, but what made you pick the city? Because for example, Anthony, you said you were in Cali, and then now you're in Medellin, and Conrad, you're in Medellin. So what made you pick the city that you're in? And what's the appeal of it? So Conrad, you go first, and then Anthony.
Yeah, so whenever I first came here at the beginning of 2016, the weather was awesome. It's like mid 70s, 80s year round. The food's good. The people are awesome. You do have to speak Spanish, basically. That'll be probably another question later on to get to. But without any Spanish, it's pretty tough to get by on the basics. But with a little bit, you're fine. I've been to other cities here in Colombia, Cartagena, Cali, Bogota, all these other places. But I feel like just the weather being the same type of amazing temperature and just the way people are here, it's just been eye-opening and very, very humbling.
Cool. Anthony?
For me, my first trip down to Cali, I ended up meeting this kind of goes in what you're talking about, the dating scene and everything like that. What initially brought when I went down to Cali, I met somebody, and we had started talking. We started dating for a year and such. Unfortunately, we broke up a couple months back before I actually originally moved out here, and that's why I don't really Cali's. I have to say, like, it's kind of weird. Cali, like, Medellin is the city of eternal spring. As he was saying, it's like perfect 60, like 70-degree weather all year round. Cali is the city of summer. If you love hot weather, that is the city you want to be in, because it is constantly over 80 degrees almost every day. It's beautiful out there. And the other reason why I love Colombia just as much as it honestly reminds me of my time spent in Hawaii. The people here are very kind, they're friendly. Hawaii is like America, but it has its own unique culture. And Colombia basically it's not like America, but they have their own unique culture within itself. People are very friendly. They're always willing to help. Even if your Spanish is poor, they still, as long as you're trying, they still tell you your Spanish is good. They never are very rude. They're very polite people.
They do lie to you about your Spanish, because this happens to me all the time. And they say, "Oh, well, you have good Spanish." No, I don't. Stop lying.
No, don't tell. It's an American thing. It's like, just tell me my Spanish is bad. You don't have to say it's good. Like, honestly, just tell me I'm bad so I can improve.
Right. So, and I'm alluding to it a little bit. Before we get into the dating life, which just can be infused into it, I want to know, like, what are some true and false perceptions that you have learned about Colombia since you've arrived? Because, I mean, before I came here, for instance, Narcos was out, but I'm from New York City. And so I've been around, sort of rough areas. So for me, Colombia was like, okay, that's like that. Whatever they're showing me on TV doesn't necessarily mean anything to me. But what were some of the false perceptions you had that were overcome? And what are some of the perceptions that you thought were real that were really real? So Anthony, I have you go first, and then Conrad, you can follow up.
I can say for myself, I didn't really have any perceptions about Colombia, because, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not a big media person. So, like, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead and all that stuff, Narcos, never seen an episode. I can honestly, I am probably one of those people that you call who live underneath a rock. So I honestly didn't have any perceptions about it. The only thing I knew about Colombia was basically during the time with Pablo Escobar, and how everyone was talking about Colombia as this dangerous country. And the way I looked at it was more or less, and I look at this with everything in life, every part of the world is dangerous. You just need to know more or less where to go. There are certain areas in countries that are much more dangerous than others. But the main thing is, if you keep your nose clean and you're smart about where you're going, you should be okay no matter where you go. And by living by that rule, I've been perfectly fine in Colombia. I mean, I stand out in this country. I'm a black man with dreadlocks. I stand out like a sore thumb. Like, it's obvious I am not from this country. And then when I speak, it becomes even more apparent. But the truth of the matter is my perception is, when you're just going to another country, if you're polite and you keep your nose clean, you do what you're supposed to, you treat people just with the bare minimum of respect, you're not going to have too many problems no matter where you go.
All right, Conrad?
Yeah, to piggyback on that one again. So I'm a white, pale-skinned man with blonde hair, so I definitely stick out as well down here. You don't really find that, often, except for expats. But for me, I think the most important thing is that people may not even realize where Colombia is. When I say I live in Colombia, they're like, "Oh, you live in South Carolina?" Instead of South America. So for me,
no,
it's kind of letting people know.
Colombia's the one in South Carolina. Colombia, not
with an O.
Fort Jackson.
Yeah, for me, I think the connection people may have is, what they see on TV, like the shows that you mentioned earlier, highlighting the 80s of Colombia, and that doesn't really show how the country's changed since that point in time. It's almost like people from, outside the U.S. watching TV about the U.S. about cowboys and Indians. It's not the same anymore.
That's a great analogy.
Things have changed a little bit. So to me, I think, Colombia, as far as perception, It's got an amazing culture with people. It's becoming more of a green area. Even here in Medellin, there's new buses and taxis that are energy efficient. But another conception is, you know, when people from the U.S. I think go somewhere, they just expect somebody to understand them, and that's not going to happen, especially in a country where English is not the primary language. So coming down, like I said before, with basic Spanish is something that's very important. When I came down here, my Spanish was very poor, and I really couldn't get by until I took some classes. So I took classes and spent the time to learn the basics of it, and that really opened up the people in the local area to being able to have a conversation with them instead of using Google Translator instead of having a conversation.
And you are the segue master for that, because my next question is about what are the most challenging parts about living here and the best parts. And this is where you can actually add in, hey, well, the dating life and the beautiful women, because that is actually absolutely true. And the language, like how difficult the language was, is it a barrier, and so forth. So Conrad, I have you start. So some of the challenging parts that you've dealt with and some of the best parts, the most enjoyable parts you've had.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the challenging parts, because you want to hear the bad before the good, I guess. The most challenging stuff for me, like I said, first off was the language, because I grew up, spent some time in Germany when I was younger with my parents being stationed there, learned a little bit of German, but never heard Spanish until I moved abroad. And learning a language whenever you're 10, 15 years old is a lot easier than when it is when you're 30, or especially when you're in your 50s, 60s. So taking the time to learn the language that you're trying to go and see in that place is kind of important to at least learn the basics, like how do I get from here to home? How do I get to the restaurant? How to order? Those things I think are really important. And then the other part is the lifestyle. The lifestyle in Colombia is different. It puts things in perspective for those coming from the U.S. or Europe here. People don't walk around with expensive clothing on, with their expensive jewelry or fancy cars. It's not really required, and rather it brings more attention to you than you really need. So here, the heart and respect from the people are the main items that help you to get by with your living and lifestyle. But to bring apart the best parts of it, it's awesome traveling. You meet so many different people from different walks of life. In the 4 years that I've been here in Medellin, I've met people that run businesses worldwide. I've met people that run mom and pop shops. There's a variety of people that you can meet here and learn from, network with, create new friendships with, volunteering here. There's just a lot of opportunities that you can find that you can give back to the community and also to grow your personal self.
Amen, sir. And Anthony?
For myself, being a military brat, my first early moments were actually in Panama, the country literally right above Colombia. So I was introduced to Spanish at an early age. But the issue was I never got a chance to use Spanish. So my parents would always tell me as a kid, you were always just sitting down watching cartoons in Spanish and laughing. Became an adult, I couldn't understand a lick of what anyone told me. Fast forward to basically my time in college. In high school, I took 3 years in Spanish, but my parents forced me. Didn't want to learn it. Like, I took 4 years. I literally dropped out my fourth year because I remember I sat down in class and it was like, you got to write a paragraph what you do over the summer. And I couldn't do any of it. And I literally, that day, next day, I dropped the class. College, I was taking Spanish, but again, in an Asian dominated country, learning Spanish, that was very weird. My teacher spoke fluent Spanish, could speak to any people from Colombia, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, pure Spanish. But she herself was Asian. She couldn't teach. So I've been trying to do self-teaching. I'm looking for classes right now. Language itself is bare necessity. Being here all the time, I've had to learn the language as I go. I know bits and pieces of it. Like I can understand what people speak to me, but I just cannot speak back. But I've been kind of lucky because most of my friends, which have been a lot more females, have wanted to literally just take care of me. Like they literally have wanted to try to help me deal with anything, to help order food, get what I need, just take me around places. The culture here is just, again, as you're saying, it's not so much, as to piggyback what Conrad was saying, was it's not so much, you don't really see too many people with expensive items walking around. It's very minimalistic. The country is very, for us Americans, you can get by with a little bit of cash to get here, but for anyone in this country, a lot of the items that we take for granted back in America are very expensive. So if you walk around with expensive items, it's a very huge indicator that you're a foreigner, because you're going to see not that many people have these items. As far as it comes with the people, again, to piggyback off what Conrad was talking about, I've had the mention of, as soon as I say I'm from the United States, people who at least know a little bit English try speaking English with me because they want to there's not many people who speak English down here. They want to actually sit down and talk with someone, a foreigner who actually knows the language. So they every time I meet somebody, like, you're from the United States, they start speaking broken English, and we communicate back and forth, my broken Spanish and their broken English, and we just correct each other as we go. But it's the country itself, like that's just like a mixture, in my opinion, just from what I've seen in all these trips I've been here.
So another question I have for you guys, and you live in different parts than me, and you've lived in different places, specifically around Colombia in the moment. What do you think are the ways to maximize your stay in Colombia? Because Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, but it also, as you said often in the conversation, is some of the most friendly people. So I think I left off with Conrad. So Conrad, if you would start, and then Anthony, you can piggyback off that question.
Yeah, thanks. So there's a few points I'd mention about maximizing the stay, while in Colombia. First is realizing the time limits that you have. You can spend, it's like a tourist visa. There's no visa you're applying for. It's more like you're allowed to enter the country for 3 months at a time. You can then extend it for another 3 months for a maximum of 6 months a year. So potentially you could be here from June to September and then extend for September to December, but then you'd have to leave for 1 day at least until the beginning of January, and then you can start over. It's a calendar year. So people have to understand the time constraints, and there are some ins and outs on how to do it, like I mentioned there. But if you want to stay longer, there's visa options. It's just, you have to know how to stay if you want to. So some people, fall in love with the city or culture, and they want to stay without realizing the time constraints. Second would be, as I mentioned before, the basic Spanish that you need in order to get around. You can get by with barely any, but the more you learn, the more that the culture is going to be open and accepting and being able to communicate properly. And third would just be to enjoy the surroundings, the people, the food, the lifestyle, and everything about the culture. There's a lot more, of course, which I could mention, but part of traveling is also learning and experiencing new places.
Awesome. And Anthony?
I have to say, basically for me, Americans, we don't really deal with visas. That's not something our passport has access to, just basically the tourist visa for over hundreds of countries. So when I initially finished school, and after applying to multiple jobs and not being hired, and I decided to move down here, before I moved down here, I was looking how to get a visa to do it. But online was just basically a bunch of mazes of running through what needed to be done, trying to ask certain people what needed to be done to get the visa was a bit more confusing, to the point where basically I threw caution to the wind, and I just I'm going to figure out as I'm going, because I can't seem to get the answers I need online or anybody else, which usually in the world we live in, you can go online and find whatever answer you need. It's as Conrad said, basically a regular tourist visa is you just get off the plane, they stamp you, it's good for 90 days. And then you can pay an extra 100, 200, I think it's about $200 for the extra, another 90 to stay here. And then basically, again, it's good for 1 calendar year. Then you got to come back the beginning of the next year and got to try again. And I've just been looking up all the different visas, and the main issue has just been trying to get the right paperwork to the lawyer that I'm dealing with now, so I can actually stay, which finally was able to get done. And now I have my visa and I'm happy.
That's great. And my experience is a bit different because I came here as a volunteer, as a part of a volunteer program, and I did that for 2 years. And then a year ago, I started working at a private school, and now I'm working at an institute. So I understand. And like after, I don't know, well, let me ask you this, because this is kind of a personal thing for me, and maybe you can relate to it. So my original plan when I came here is I was here for 6 months, right? So I came the 3rd of July, and I left in November, December. And my goal was to learn Spanish. And then I went back to the United States, and life felt so different when I was back in the United States. It just, I felt a bit disconnected from the lifestyle and everything, just sort of because of the sort of the culture. And I don't want to use shock, but shock might be the best word I have, the culture shock.
No, that probably would describe it best.
Right. But it's like a reverse culture shock, right? Because it's my normal life. And it was really different for me. So I was presented with the opportunity to come back to Colombia in January, and I immediately came back, and I didn't leave. And so for you guys, what was your experience like kind of coming to Colombia, going back to the States and being like, man, it's really different, and you had a different appreciation? Anthony, I'll let you go first, and then Conrad, you can follow up.
The first time was a complete culture shock. The driving out here, if you're from America, it is not like the driving out here. Like my first thing was getting off the airplane and getting into a taxi to my hotel, and I was in Cali, Colombia, seeing the huge plantation field as I'm driving from the airport towards the city. And as I'm going, I'm just seeing mopeds and bikes weaving through traffic and everything. And I'm just looking, I'm like, what is going on right now? Then you get in the actual city and you see how they drive. And it's literally, if you're used to driving in America, it is literally like a heart attack where you're like, what the hell's going on? There's lines on the road, but nobody is obeying them. What is the point of it? So it's a bit of a culture shock. But from my first initial meeting with my the reception desk, using a little bit of Spanish and meeting them, they were trying to talk to me and get me accustomed to being in Colombia. I actually, within like the first week of my hotel, a glass shower door ended up falling on me. And they were very quick to try getting me a new place and make me feel very comfortable. It was the same as just when I started going out into the streets and talking with people and everything else like this. Everyone was just friendly. They were just smiling, happy, and it was just very nice. And then after spending a month here vacation during the summertime in Colombia and then going back to Hawaii, again, Hawaii is almost the same thing, but not really. It was kind of like a huge culture shock. It was like, I was telling my friends, like, I miss being in Colombia right now. I was like, you're back here. I'm like, yes, Hawaii is probably one of the most beautiful states in America, islands just about everywhere you turn and everything like this, but it didn't compete with just the culture, the food, everything about Colombia, in my opinion.
All right, Conrad?
Yeah, so I think the driving is definitely one of the culture shocks that people see when they come here. You know, usually in the U.S., you think you've got to do defensive driving, be cognizant of your surroundings and understand who's coming up behind you. Really, I think here in Colombia, whenever I first started dating my wife, we had a car, and I had to be more offensive. I had to try to, be Colombian, I think, in order to pull in front of somebody or try to get around somebody the right way, because if you don't, then you're going to be stuck somewhere or somebody's going to hit you. So definitely driving is definitely a huge culture shock getting here. But as Anthony mentioned also, the people here are very helpful. Even if you don't speak Spanish, they can be very helpful with getting around. And I spent a few years in Germany when I was younger. And the European culture can sometimes be closed with people. And so they don't want to be as helpful. But here it seems like everybody in the street is willing to help. Even if you don't understand, you just use your arm signals and ask, directions, and it sort of helps out. A couple other small things. Power plugs in Colombia, it's the same. Whenever I have family coming down here, they're like, what type of power plug do they use? No, it's the same as the U.S. So that's really helpful. You can bring the same appliances down here, same computer plugs without any issues. And also there's cell phone plans you can get here, or there's ones from the U.S. you can get abroad. So there's a lot of things that you can bring from the U.S., but there are some things that you can't, that you need to get here only. Like, for example, here everybody loves arepas. There's no
Oh my God. Oh my
no
God.
arepa cookers in the U.S. really. And here you have to get them here. So it's some things you need here that you can't get in the U.S.
It's interesting you mentioned arepa because I thought they were disgusting when I first came here until I had arepa chocolo. And then another thing that is a specific culture shock is aguardiente. I'm like, what is this disgusting, nasty thing? And then now it's like whatever to me. But go ahead, Anthony. It sounded like you wanted to say something.
To piggyback off both y'all, for what Conrad said, for them being helpful, that goes back to also why I think probably what captured me wanting to come back was my first initial stay here was right near the last 7 days of my trip. Someone had hacked my bank account, and basically I literally had no money to, like, that money that was in my account was to pay my trip so I can pay my exit bill for my hotel and get back to the airport. Luckily, the bank, I had to sit all night talking with banks back in America to get my money back. But the problem was the card that I had, they had closed it out, so I couldn't use the card anymore. The money was back in my account, but I couldn't use the card. So I had to sit down, call family and friends, and I had to send that money to a friend so they could send it to me through Western Union so I could go pick it up as cash. The whole time, the day that I was leaving, the money I had just gotten was just enough to pay my bill. The people at the front desk were sitting down and talking to me to try figuring out how I could get the rest of the money to pay my taxi cab driver to actually get to the airport. They were trying to figure out a way to help me out, which is something Americans, depending on where you go, you might find some that try to help you, and you might find some that just don't want anything to do with it. And then the other thing to also piggyback what Conrad saying was there are certain things that you can get here that you can't. I came down here, I drank aguardiente, and I ate arepas, and I fell in love with them. Like, I immediately was like, you can't find this in America. I love it. I'm going to miss it when it's gone. But the other thing is, I'm a big technology major. And the one thing I can say, as I said earlier, is there's certain things that are a little bit more pricey to have. And technology, as much as Colombia is starting to get ahead in the world, certain things that you probably would like from America cost a little bit more down here, or it's just not here. So if you're going to live down here, you're probably going to have someone mail it to you, because my computer actually at the moment is starting to slowly die, but the brand of model that it is not sold anywhere in Colombia. And I've talked with basically Windows themselves to see if I could buy it. It's just not available here. I'd actually have to buy it in America and ship it here, just because I can't get it here.
Wow. And you actually segued to the next point that I was going to ask. So it'll be you and then Conrad. What do you see for the future of living in Colombia? Because it's a different country. I've been here for 3 years, and what I've seen is I saw the election in the United States, and then I saw the end. I saw the peace process that came when they signed the treaty. I saw the election of a new president, and I've seen a couple of strikes. But in all of that, the people have maintained very positive energies and moods. So what do you think do you see for the future of expat living in Colombia, and just the future of Colombia from your eyes going forward?
For myself, I see myself staying here for a good amount of years right now. I love Colombia. I love America. I say this all the time with people. There's no perfect nation in the world. America's going through its growing pains right now, and it's kind of obvious.
I love America, and just being a veteran is being mainly making it a little bit easier for me to actually stay here at the moment. I'm going to need to learn more Spanish, but at the moment I have a girlfriend who has helped me get through learning Spanish, and I'm teaching her English at the same time. So we're growing together. But I've to kind of help deal with certain things. I order a lot of things in America. I have a PO box that my friend basically I send things to that, and basically I have him mail those items to me just because I know I can't get them here. Or basically the only other thing I can do is basically buy a ticket, go back to America to pick up the items and come back, which seems a lot more work than what it really needs to be. So, I mean, for myself, I see myself staying here for a good amount of years. I don't know exactly how long, but for right now, I'm enamored with the country. I love it. The people, the food, the culture, just everything about it. And we'll see how much longer I'll be here. But for right now, I'm at least saying maybe a good between 5 to 10 years right now.
That's awesome. All right, Conrad, and your turn.
So I think future-wise for Colombia, for me, I think there's a really bright future. Over the past 4 years I've been here, I've seen a lot of the cities grow. There's a lot of new restaurants popping up all the time. They're creating bike lanes through the main streets for the e-bikes and the scooters to go through. There's a lot of new construction in the area that can help with, not with the traffic side yet right now, but in the future it'll help with, creating larger lanes for people to go for traffic, because in Medellin, there's 4 million people here. It's a tiny town. It's like the size of, it's smaller than the size of Indianapolis. I grew up in Indiana, but it's to think there's like 800,000 people in that area compared to 4 million in a lot smaller space. It's just really congested here. So dealing with the traffic is, one thing that's in the system for the government to work on. And even Amazon has started sending to Colombia without any shipping fees. Of course, if it's, I believe, over $200, you have to pay the import tax for it. But that's really great for a lot of people down here to get free shipping for the smaller items that they need. And especially, like I hit on it before, the healthcare down here is great. A lot of the doctors here, they even go to the U.S. to train. They may say their English is bad, but when you talk to them, you realize it's actually pretty decent. So there's a lot of opportunities for growth in this area, and especially like we mentioned before, with the healthcare initiative for the veterans to have a community and a brotherhood for people to be able to network and have somebody to talk to for their issues. Because being a veteran, if you live outside the U.S., you may feel like it's a small community, but if you realize that there's a community of 50, 100, 200 people that you can talk to, that's a really great thing to have support for in your life.
Awesome. So basically the fun time, right? So I asked the question because I think it's worth knowing, because it's an exotic place in many areas in the country. So what would you say are the types of things that you can do for work or for play in Colombia? And what are some of the best places to visit and vacation to? Because yes, you live in Medellin or you live in Cali, but where are some of the best places to go visit while you're here? And what's the best things to do with your free time here?
Yeah, so I'll start on that one. I'd say like the work play field really depends on maybe your background and the future you want to have living in Colombia. There can be a lot of opportunities for somebody with zero money and a lot of opportunities with a lot of money. There's different things you can start, new businesses. You could potentially work from home, volunteer, or you can even be retired here. I know people all the way from 18 into their 80s that are living down here, that are all the way from new and ones that have lived here for 10 plus years. About places to visit in Colombia, you have to realize that Colombia has every type of terrain you can really think of. There's mountains, there's desert, there's beach, there's forests, There's everything that you can think is down here, and it's all within a short flight. That's one thing that people have to realize too, is that, for example, Bogota, driving wise, it takes 8 hours to get there, but a flight, it's less than an hour. So, so distance wise is something that people have to understand, but you can jump on a bus, you can jump on a flight, and say round trip from here, from Medellin to Bogota, can cost $50 on a flight. That's round trip. So, and with regards to type of work to work in, there's businesses that are down here that need people that are fluent in English. Maybe they can be in publications. Maybe they can be potentially in from a call center. They can be electric companies, companies that provide exports or imports, and then also, you know, the healthcare industry. There's just a lot of opportunities down here that there's no book really on how to start a business by yourself here in Colombia. There's books you can read, that you can find, you know, the top books for business entrepreneurs in the world, but you know, unless you jump down in here and see what it's like, you're not going to understand how amazing the culture is and the opportunities are down here.
All right, Anthony.
For myself, like as far as it goes with like fun things to do, Colombia, it depends on the hobbies you like to do. I have been a mixed martial arts fighter for almost 10 years now. So for me, I enjoy doing martial arts. So I like going to gyms, just working out and being able and learning, because a martial art is not something that's solid. It's something that everyone uses different techniques and such. So I'm open to, I sit down and I go to gyms and I just look at different techniques that they're showing, and I show the techniques that I've learned over the years, and it's an exchange of basically education and knowledge. Just keep it growing. As far as work in business, I'm still new, so I'm not going to speak on something I honestly don't have much knowledge about. Things to do, there's always something to do, just depends on what you like to do. As Conrad said, there's different areas to go visit. I'm hoping eventually to go out to what's the Cartagena over up in the northern part of Colombia, to visit that. I hope to go visit the rainforest, see the many wonderful, beautiful animals that hopefully may not be here when I have kids before they go extinct. I just want to explore everything this country has to offer.
And it's really great because one of the things, and I don't know, you guys can chime in on this, one of the things that I do love about Colombia, but it confuses me to no end, is the holidays. There's so many festivals, as they say here, that it's there's always time off. I believe there's 18 holidays in a year. I know in
It has Colombia leads. I think Colombia leads in the world with the most holidays.
Oh, I love it. And so the thing is, there's always an opportunity and there's time to travel. So, for instance, especially with this festivals that are happening. So, for instance, in January in Manizales is their feria. So they're going to have 2 weeks of a fair. And then there's the Blanco y Negro festival down in Pasto. And I have some friends down there. And I went to San Andres for Semana Santa. Absolutely amazing. You can get a pretty low-cost flight on Vivo Colombia. And so, Conrad, like you were talking about traveling, there's at least a minimum 2 low-cost airlines, Viva Colombia and Easy Fly, where you can really kind of get to any city you want to. And when you talk about mixed martial arts or other things like that, Anthony, I have a friend that I met through the Colombia Bilingue program, and he lives in Buga, and that's all he does down there. So they have so many cool things available. And so just once you have your bearing and you get a chance to feel out what's what in the country, you'll really, really enjoy it even more. My biggest thing, and I guess I'll sort of say this as a one more question. What has it been like to try to get people to come visit you here? Because I've had in the 3 years I've been here, my mother has visited me, my cousin has visited me, and my sister. And that's it. And not to say I don't want more, but I've invited people, but it's been a really a bit of a task because of the perceptions that exist in mass media or in entertainment media about Colombia. So what has it been like for you to get people to come visit you in Colombia? Anthony, you can go first, and then Conrad, you can go second.
For myself right now, everyone knows that I'm in the process of trying to get myself settled up for people to come visit. So people right now are just actually just waiting for me to actually get everything set up so they can come visit. And I tell them it's like one of two things. Either you can, if my place is big enough, you can come stay with me, or you can get a hotel, which again, I've told them it's not that expensive out here. And I told them straight up, I'm not driving. So be prepared to take Uber, which is again super cheap. I've driven all over Medellin, and I barely spent $10 on an Uber down here.
Okay, cool. And Conrad, what about you?
Yeah, so I've had family come down over the past 4 years. I had friends coming down from the start. I had about 25 come down for my wedding a couple of years ago. At the same time, that was a fun time coordinating all of that. But primarily, it's been they've had issues or questions about the area because they don't know. If they look on the news, they hear something, but it's good to talk to somebody on the ground that knows the area and knows where to stay, knows where not to stay. Just all these things that having somebody here, and there's a part of trust, in knowing that person. But really, it's it's pretty easy when you talk to somebody and mention actually how safe it is. If you don't walk around giving papaya, as they say here in Medellin, and then you're pretty safe. You don't walk outside with your cell phone after going out until 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not something you do in downtown LA. So as long as you maintain your situational awareness and understand your surroundings, then you'll be in a good position. I've never had any issues in the 4 years I've been here with security wise, and I've stuck to my family, myself, and I enjoy going out playing with friends when we go out to uh, sometimes watch sports, something on those lines. But it's really a great place that people can learn about as long as they have somebody that they can connect with and understand where to stay and where not to stay.
Awesome. So now I alluded to it a little bit earlier, and so I just want to kind of come to this question because I know because I know, Anthony, you said you had a girlfriend and you've had a girlfriend before, and Conrad, you're married. So what is, in your opinion, dating like? Because I think dating is very different here. In Colombia, you're going to see very, very nice things to look at all times, in my opinion. But what is dating like? Because dating is very different here, in my opinion, than it is stateside. So, Conrad, I'll have you start, and then Anthony, you can follow up.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. So the dating life here, there's a lot of different ways you can date, I guess. There's people that come down here and like to use applications online to find somebody in the local area, and that's a primary one that a lot of people like to use. And another one is just going out and doing things that you like to do. So if you like to go to church, you go to the church, you meet somebody in that area. You like to go to events, you go to that event and find somebody there. Mine specifically, I went to the Modern Arts Museum and they had a movie outside with some of my friends, and my wife then knew the friends as well. We started talking and got along well. So one thing to also notice is that when people go out to go on a first date, sometimes here it's part of the culture that they like to bring a friend. It could be a friend or a cousin, and sometimes you may end up going on a date with somebody and somebody else shows up as well, just to be there as far as like a form of security, and then that person ends up leaving after a little while. So these are things that you have to sort of roll with it when it goes into the dating life. But there's also situations if you're starting out in the dating life to take into account. For example, if they don't want to, if they're meeting you at your front door with the portero, the doorman, and they don't want to give their ID card, that could be a sign of something bad. So there's some things you need to keep a situational awareness as well when you're starting the dating life here, because not everything is perfect in life. But if you meet the right person, you'll know and you'll be able to grow and have that communication and grow over time with that person.
That's awesome. And Anthony, because I do know about the bringing a friend with you thing. That's funny to me. But Anthony, what about you, man?
I have to say, it's the other thing is Colombia is very much a take it slow culture. So if you're told that they'll be running that they're going to try and you don't hear anything back from them, you have to understand culturally that it's understood in just within the culture that something probably came up between in the family or something personal, and they're not going to let you know that what's going on. You just expect it to just know. So I've had a couple times where it's like, oh, I'm coming to see you, and then you're sitting down waiting for hours. It's like, what the hell happened? Because in America, it's normal for us to say like, oh, I'm gonna be running late. Colombia, you're not gonna get a message that they're gonna be coming late. Either they're saying they're on their way, or they just don't tell you anything at all. Um, it I've had many times with my ex where she was like, oh, I'm on the way, and then the next thing I know, it's like hours later she just didn't show up. I'm like, what happened? She was like, oh, something came up. I was like, you couldn't tell me that. And again, you have to understand the culture here is that means something probably within the family or close to them happened, and you just got to accept it. You can't have the American mind state.
And so, really quickly, if you could say one thing that is your favorite thing about Colombia, what would you say? Anthony, you go first, and then Conrad.
The one thing I love the most about this country is the food. My God, it's the food. I don't know if basically I want to say probably because they don't really have to do a mass production of food such as America. So a lot of it isn't processed food. That even just getting a regular hamburger tastes almost like getting food from a 4 or 5-star restaurant, in my opinion, because it's just not so processed. It's everything's fresh and it's just amazing. Like, I don't usually eat salads, but ever since I moved to Colombia, I'll eat a salad like it's nothing down here. It's nothing. The food is amazing to me. I love it down here.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
that's part of it for me as well. I think it's for me it's just variety. There's a lot of variety down here in the food, in the types of places you can go to visit. So I think having the close proximity of everything being within an hour to try everything from going to the ocean, going to the coffee fields, going fishing, trying fruits, exotic fruits that you would never see in the U.S. I mean, there's one fruit that's actually from the Brazilian side that's actually acai, but that's something you can get here as well that's just delicious. Leche, there's a lot of amazing fruits that are down here. But in general, just the variety of travel and food and amazing people are down here.
So, with that, there are some interesting things in their highlights. So, Conrad, I'll let you go first. What are some highlights that someone should know about coming to this country as far as like just activities?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, there's a ton of holidays here. I mean, I feel like every other weekend there's a holiday, and they've got a 3 or 4 day weekend. But there's a reason to it. It's a big Catholic community, so that involves all of the Catholic holidays for the saints, etc. But there's a lot of events that happen throughout the year. There's Carnival in Barranquilla. There's the Flower Festival in Medellin. There's different events across the whole country that take into account. And specifically in December coming up this next weekend, it's like a candle lighting ceremony where all of the streets in the barrios, the cities, the little suburbs, they put candles out in all the streets, and it's beautiful going to see the Christmas lights around the area. So for me, I think enjoying the holiday season here is a great thing to experience, and try to coordinate your flights around, because sometimes the flights might be more expensive. But if you can coordinate around that, then there's a lot of opportunities to see some amazing sights here.
Anthony, you want to add anything to that?
Unfortunately, I would love to, but I can't, just because I'm a neophyte in this country. I just know that there are so many holidays here, and I'm waiting to actually see and experience them. This would be just my second time here for Christmas in Colombia, because I was here last year.
visiting my girlfriend for Christmas and New Year. So
I want to do a final thought and an evaluation for how the veteran community helps you. So my question specifically, and Anthony, you can start us, and then Conrad, you can close us out, is how has being a part of the veteran community in Colombia helped you, and what would be a recommendation for someone to come to Colombia if they were coming here the first time? And then I'll again, Anthony, you first, and then Conrad, you can close us out.
The veteran community has helped me because it goes once you're military, you're always family. So it doesn't matter what branch you were. We all served underneath the same flag. We all serve time. So we all take care of each other. And the veteran community, from serving to be a veteran, it's the same thing. So immediately, like I said, when I came out here, I actually met somebody at the gym I was going to, who introduced me into the group. And the minute I came into the group, I've been dealing with trying to actually get my visa to actually stay down here, because if not, then I actually have to leave the country. And currently right now, I actually don't have anything for me back in America. So going back would make me homeless. So just been trying to deal with that. And the group itself has been helping me out. Like I've been enrolled to start my healthcare program again. I've been able to get my paperwork for my visa. So it's just been wonderful. And I mean, again, if anyone plans on coming down here, save money. That's the best thing I can tell you. Just save money. I mean, American dollar goes far down here, but if you want to live like a Colombian, you're not going to need much. But if you're planning to live like an American in Colombia, you're going to need a lot of money.
Amen. Thank you, sir. And Conrad?
Yeah, to talk about the veteran network down here. When I came down here originally, I, as a veteran, didn't know which doctor was the best one to go to. You know, there's a lot of doctors down here, but who do you go to for your back? Who do you go to for your sleep apnea or whatever you have condition-wise in the VA? So at the beginning of 2019, there was this initiative to help specifically the veterans in Colombia to get seen while living abroad. From there, the community has grown, and I believe it's going to continue to grow more in the forward times. For more veterans to learn about the opportunities and medical coverage that people can receive while living abroad, because the healthcare down here, even the World Health Organization has even ranked Colombia's healthcare higher than the U.S., and that's pretty renowned to understand the differences between the level of high quality healthcare you can receive while living abroad, as long as you know who you're talking to and which doctors are good. And that's what this initiative here in Colombia has done.